Not long ago, China's permanent representative to the UN, Zhang Jun, made a statement demanding an international investigation into crimes committed by the United States. And interestingly, alongside the extermination of Native Americans and the killing of civilians in Iraq, Afghanistan, and Syria, the Great Depression was also mentioned. The Great Depression refers to the global economic crisis of 1929 to 1939. This crisis led to the collapse of many world economies and gave rise to numerous social problems. These problems contributed to Adolf Hitler coming to power in Germany. So many researchers consider the Great Depression to be one of the main causes of World War II. At the same time, in the West, and partly in our country, there is a widespread view that the Great Depression was caused solely by economic problems, namely the crisis of overproduction. And, for example, you don't hear much about the collusion on the London and New York stock exchanges. Well, let's take a look at that. It is believed that the economic crisis was the result of a massive collapse in stock prices on the U.S. exchanges in October 1929. In reality, the stock market crash, known as the Wall Street crash, was triggered by another event. A month before the collapse of American stocks, on September 20, 1929, another exchange crashed, the London Stock Exchange. After World War I, the United States became the UK's largest creditor during its crisis.
Соединенного Королевства.
The crash of the London Stock Exchange meant a technical default on England's foreign debts. After that, the domino effect kicked in. After the London Stock Exchange, the New York Stock Exchange also collapsed. After that, the American government announced a temporary freeze on its own and foreign payments. This caused economic collapse in countries that had invested in the States. The circumstances of the London Stock Exchange crash were investigated by the Office of the Attorney General for England and Wales, after which a trial took place. The court ruled that fraudulent actions by several brokers caused the stock market crash on both the London and New York stock exchanges. All of them were sentenced to various prison terms for fraud and forgery, but were soon released and continued to successfully run their businesses. So, to put it mildly, talk about a crisis of overproduction is superficial, and to be frank, it's simply said to distract and obscure the real issue. In reality, even legally, the fact of collusion was established. The point is, it wasn't just a few brokers colluding, but an international conspiracy involving several Anglo-American bankers. This is supported by the fact that the convicted brokers were in constant contact with the management of the Bank of England. In addition, 6 months before the crisis, on March 25, 1929, the U.S. Federal Reserve System officially warned about the presence of fraudulent speculation with stocks on the New York and London exchanges. The Federal Reserve's statement directly cited the risk of a stock market crash. One detail: after announcing this, the financial regulator did nothing to prevent this catastrophe. But we'll come back to this a little later. Now let's look at some other facts. In the States, about 45 banks went completely bankrupt, and their depositors lost more than $40 billion. And that's about $660 billion in today's dollars. Within a few months, the American middle class completely disappeared, and in its place, an army of unemployed people emerged. The number of unemployed people rose from 3 to 25% of the working-age population. The situation of those who managed to keep their business or their job turned out to be only slightly better. Their average income dropped by 60% overall. 50% of the working-age population ended up below the poverty line. Here's an eloquent photo from those years. The poster says, "I know 3 trades, I speak 3 languages, I fought for 3 years, I have 3 children, and I haven't done anything for 3 months. All I need is one job." And someone wrote ads like this: "I'll sell this car for $100, I need cash. I lost everything on the stock market." On top of everything, a severe drought hit the United States and caused widespread hunger. In West Virginia and Illinois, Kentucky and Pennsylvania, up to 90% of the population was starving during this period. The number of people who died from hunger is still undisclosed, but the dry statistics indicate a demographic collapse. If in the relatively prosperous 1920s, the population growth in the U.S. was 16.2%, then in the 1930s, it dropped by more than half, to 7.3%. Against this backdrop, federal agencies not only failed to take any steps to alleviate the Depression, but on the contrary, began to suppress those who called on the government to develop a program to overcome the crisis. The most outrageous was the crackdown on the participants of the Hunger March in Washington in July 1932. The participants, veterans of World War I, were merely demanding a resolution to the issue of unpaid funds owed to them under contracts with the U.S. Army. Their demonstrations were conducted exclusively in a peaceful manner, and they themselves were unarmed. Nevertheless, Russia sent tanks against them, followed by regular army units in gas masks. A gas of unknown origin was used against the veterans, and the number of casualties has not been disclosed to this day. From the point of view of maintaining order, this action and others like it made no sense at all. The point was to intimidate society on the eve of the most important stage of the gold confiscation from the population. In April 1933, President Franklin Roosevelt signed a decree that effectively authorized the confiscation of gold. The gold held by individuals and organizations in bars and coins would be confiscated. Formally, the government pledged to pay compensation for voluntarily surrendered precious metals at a rate of about $21 per troy ounce. Given the rapid devaluation of the dollar, this price was almost 3 times lower than the actual value of the surrendered gold bars. At the same time, some people's gold was simply confiscated without any payment. But why was such a massive and brazen robbery necessary? 2 main goals can be identified. The Great Depression enabled the elimination of competitors. Several thousand banks that owned shares in the Bank of England and the Federal Reserve went bankrupt. Another goal was to create a gold reserve to back the new world currency. In the 1920s, the United States, having become a global creditor, came close to turning the dollar into a world currency. There was only one step left, and for that, it was necessary to back the Federal Reserve's unit of account with significant gold reserves. Gold mining at that time was at a low level. Therefore, the most effective method chosen was to rob their own population. In the midst of the crisis and the general impoverishment of the population, the Federal Reserve's gold reserves doubled. At the beginning of the Great Depression, according to official data, it slightly exceeded 5,000 tons, and by the end it had reached 10,500 tons. In connection with all this, it is interesting that the head of the Federal Reserve, Ben Shalom Bernanke, openly admitted the Federal Reserve's guilt in 2002. In a public speech celebrating the 90th anniversary of economist Milton Friedman's birthday, he agreed that the Great Depression was orchestrated by the Federal Reserve System. Here are his words. "I would like to say to Milton and Anna regarding the Great Depression, you are right, we did it. We are very sorry. But thanks to you, we won't do it anymore." Of course, these words were said rather ambiguously, implying that it was done out of ignorance, sort of unintentionally. However, the fact remains, the words were spoken. This was his response to the accusation by Nobel laureate economist Milton Friedman, who, together with his co-author Anna Schwartz, directly blamed the Federal Reserve for the Great Depression in their book A Monetary History of the United States. In particular, Friedman argued that the Federal Reserve System was created to prevent exactly what actually happened. It was created to avoid a situation where you would have to close banks, where you would have a banking crisis. And yet, under the Federal Reserve System, you had the worst banking crisis in the history of the United States. I can't recall another example of a government measure that led to results clearly opposite to what was expected. And this incredible collapse of the banking system, when about a third of the banks failed from start to finish, when millions of people practically lost their savings, there was absolutely no need for this decline. At all times, the Federal Reserve System had the power and the knowledge to stop this. And there were people at that time who kept urging them to do so. One way or another, the so-called Great Depression was finally ended by World War II. In the post-war period, the cyclical development of the capitalist economy, crisis, depression, recovery, and growth continued. But we'll talk about that some other time. Like and comment if you think this topic is worth exploring more. Thanks for watching. See you in future episodes on our channel.